Okay, good evening. Today we're learning Maseches Bava Daf Samach, and we're starting at the final Mishnah on Nun Testament Beis. The first third of today is going to be a regular routine Gemara, and the rest is going to be Agarata. So let's get started. 8 lines from the bottom. We've seen this Gemara before. If I, as a pikeach, if I give over a fire to a person who is either a cheresh, a shota, or a katan, so the halacha is pater b'dinei adam v'chai b'dinei shamayim. The halacha is, sorry, I'm hiding over here. The halacha is that I was irresponsible, granted, but I'm pater b'dinei adam. Bezdin cannot hold me accountable, but I'm chai b'dinei shamayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will have what to say. Shalach biyad pikeach. If I give the fire to someone who's a regular person, so then that person takes all of the responsibility for what they have done. If I give anyone in this room, I'll assume for the moment that you're all pikchim, that you're all regular, competent people. There are levels of competency also. The Mishnah doesn't delineate levels of competency. You're either a cheresh, a shota, a katan, or a pikeach. There's nothing between those levels. So the Gemara seems to say that the pikeach would be chayv the Mishnah. Then the Gemara quotes a din. The Mishnah quotes a din, and for those of us who remember Maseches Shabbos, this stands in sharp contrast to Maseches Shabbos. Take a look at this. Echad hevi esa or ve'echad hevi esa eitzim. The first guy, he brought a fire. Ve'echad hevi esa eitzim, and the second guy brought the wood. Hamevi esa eitzim chayev. The second person who brought the wood, he's the one who is held accountable. Echad hevi esa eitzim, ve'echad hevi esa or. What if it's reversed? The first person brought the wood, and the second person brought the fire. Hamevi esa or chayev. The latter person in all equations, whoever brings the final ingredient that therefore enables a fire to be built, is the person who will be held accountable. So says our Mishnah. Ba'acher v'liba. If another person came along and fanned the flame, hamila bechayev. So let's say you have fire, and I bring the fire, you bring the wood. They're sitting next to each other, but they are not connected to one another. A third person comes along with that like billowing thing that blows the air, and then he transfers the fire with wind from the fire source to the wood source and causes the fire. So the Gemara says the malaba is going to be chayev. Liv saharuach. If, however, the fire transferred only because of wind, in that case, kulan peturin. No one was really the cause of the fire. That's already biad shamayim. We can't control everything. Amar Reish Lakish mishmei dechizkiya. Lo shanu ela shamasar lo gacheles v'liba. When do we say that you are going to be chayev with a chereshot of a katan? That's only true if you give them a gacheles v'liba. If you give them a coal and you blow on it so that the fire can be fanned. Aval masar lo shal heves. Sorry, that's when you're putter. Aval masar lo shal heves. If you give over an actual flame, right? Not the capacity for a flame, but an actual flame, the din is chayev. My time of why is that? Because myself kagarmulo. Who's chayev? The pikeach. I, who gave you the tools for the fire, I'm going to be chayev if I gave you an active fire in your chereshot of a katan. Rav Yochanan, he argues, Rav Yochanan amar afilu masar lo shal heves pater. Rav Yochanan is a big makel, and even if it were to be that I gave you an actual flame, let's say I have a kerosene lamp and it's lit, and I hand it over to the chereshot of a katan, and then they burn the city down, you're still pater. Why? Because Maisa of Kagarmulo, at the end of the day, the chereshot of a katan had to do a Maisa. It's a Maisa that I can't control. Maybe it's even a Maisa that they can't control. But it doesn't mean that I, as the Baal Ha'esh, I'm the Bikeach, you can't say that I am going to be held accountable. My timer. Why is that? It's because Tzavsa the Cheresh Garmal at the end of the day was the movements of the Cheresh, and that is what makes them accountable. What are the conditions where Rav Yochanan would say that you're chayev? When you give them gavza. Rashi at the bottom Rashi on Nun Testament base that says that gavza or kotzim, it's just dried wood, which is we would often use to start a fire. You take small dried twigs; they're easier to light than the logs, and then they in turn light the logs. Silta and shraga. Rashi says silta is eitzim dakim, also small twigs, and shraga is an actual candle. There we would say that the pikeach is the one who's held accountable. So various shitas here in regards to how we look at a pikeach giving over elements of a fire to a cheresh, a shota, or a katan. On Samach Amid Aleph, on the second line, the Gemara quotes it in the Mishnah of Shalach Biyad Pikeach HaPikeach Chayev, like we saw in our Mishnah, that if I as a pikeach give you another pikeach fire, so the halacha is that you the pikeach are chayev. Amar Rav Nachman it's like man the tani liba lo mishtabesh. For those who have the girsa in our Gemara of liba. So that's what we're talking about. If you look 4 lines from the bottom on the previous Amud in the Mishnah, it says ba'acher ve'liba. This is the word that we're discussing here. So our Gemara says that if you have the word liba, lo mishtamesh, uman tani niba, also lo mishtabesh. Both leshonos are acceptable in our Mishnah, on that last line of our Mishnah when it says ba'acher ve'liba. Why is this? Well, mandatani liba lo mishtabesh, according to the Shita that says, like our Mishnah does, that it has the word liba. So there you're fine and good. Dichsiv belabas eish. We see that the word liba is connected to the word eish, and therefore no problem at all. Mandatani niba lo mishtabesh, and according to the one who holds that the language is niba, that's also not a problem. Dichsiv borei niv sifasayim, the creator of niv sifasayim, the speaking of the lips. And what this is referring to is the air that comes out blowing. That's air. And that's why the word veliba, which means to fan the flame, and niba both have the same meaning. We never saw our Mishnah in any other form than this, but our Mishnah says liba. But apparently there were other versions of our Mishnah that were niba, and our Gemara accepts those girsaos as well. No problem at all. 7 lines down at the 2 dots, livsa haruach kulan peturin, that if the wind comes along and transfers the fire from the fire source to the fuel, at the end of the day, the fire needs something to consume. So it was doing just fine, and then the wind showed up and it blew the fire onto the wood, and then the wood caused for the whole house to burn down. We said kulan peturin. The Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, we have a brisa, liba v'lipsa haruach. Let's say that I'm blowing on the flame to transfer it over to the wood. I'm not a good guy. And at the same time, v'lipsa haruach, the wind was blowing as well. So, im yesh belibuyo kedei lelabosa, if the strength of wind that's coming out of my mouth is enough to transfer the fire from the fire source to the twigs, chayev, then that would be on me. V'im lav pater. But if it was not enough, if the wind that was coming out of my mouth, the air that I was blowing out, if it wasn't enough to bring about a transference of the fire, the halacha is pater. Asks the Gemara, why is that? After all, in the world of Hilchos Shabbos, we have a din where we see that if there are 2 things happening at the same time, my effort plus an uncontrollable effort, which was our case, liba v'libsa haruach, where we said that you're pater, but we have a din by Zorah, which is winnowing. And we've all seen the pictures of you taking a pitchfork and you've cracked the chaff already, you throw it up. We want the bad parts to go away in the wind, and we want all the good stuff to resettle. So the Gemara says, Amai, why would you be pater? Lehavi kizore, viruach misayato. It should be no different than when one is winnowing and they throw up the chaff in the grain with the hope that the grain will come back down and the chaff will blow away in the air. Well, that was a 2-man job. I threw it up in the air and then the wind took over. Over there, we have a din that you're chayiv for the role that you played in Zorah. So why isn't that the same exact thing with the case of liba v'libsa haruach? So that's what the Gemara wants to know. 4 answers, until the Mishnah. They're all tightly packed over here. Here's answer number 1. What were we talking about when we said that one is pater if, let's say, I'm blowing the wind and the wind also, I'm blowing the fire to transfer over to some other source, and it's also windy out. The case was kigon shaliba mitzad echad v'libso haruach mitzad acher. I was blowing in the direction of east, and the wind was blowing in the direction of west. So if you're blowing in the direction of west, and that's the direction in which the fire transfers, then that wasn't me. In other words, we have a new kimta that we're able to determine that it was the wind of outside and not the air or the breath of mine that transferred the fire. Rava Amar, 10 lines down, he says, no, kigon shaliba baruach mitzuya. My breathing was regular breathing, but velibso haruach baruach she'enu mitzuya. I was just doing gentle, not enough maybe to transfer, not enough. She'en came, the wind that actually caused for the transfer was strong enough. So I'm just going to make this up. If the air that I blow out of my mouth is moving at 5 miles an hour, so it might cause for a flicker on the flame, but it's not enough to push the fire far enough. But in a ruach she'enu mitzuya, which might be 20 miles an hour, that could be enough to transfer the flame. So that's why, according to Rabba, even if they're both in the same direction, that's why you're pater. Reb Zeira Amar kigon de tzamra tzimure. This is a distinction that we make all the time, but the Gemara actually gives language to it. Rashi explains this. We're not going to go into Rashi now, but just good to look at. There's a difference between breathing like this, just exhaling, and this. It's a difference, right? When you purse your lips and you blow out air, you feel it much more, as opposed to much less concentrated, much less of a blow. So that's what the Gemara says is the tzamra tzimure, that when we say that I, the malabe, when I blow air out of my mouth to try and get the fire to move, if I'm only going like this, like an open mouth blow, which is not concentrated air, it's not even a strong push. So then pashut, I'm going to be putter if the air transfers because my wind is not strong enough to make that move. And if that's up against wind that is strong enough to make the fire transfer, then of course I would be putter because that's ruach she'ein mitzuya. Rav Ashi Amar, you got the whole thing wrong. Ki amrinan zore beruach mesayato, the mar makom you were asking from, the case from winnowing, that case hani mili le'enyan Shabbos, that over there was talking about Shabbos because the Maseches machshavas asra Torah. Over there, I knew that I wanted to winnow. My goal was to winnow. Aval hacha, over here you're going to be putter because we have a rule over here of grama be'almahu, the grama b'nizaken, putter. Beautiful distinction. Cases are not shava b'shava at all. You have me blowing on the wind in regards to Nezikin, blowing the fire, and you have a ruach mitzuya or ruach she'ein mitzuya blowing the fire. That's not comparable to the case of Zorah. Zorah is all about Maseches machshavas, and I dafka wanted that to happen. Of course, if you're blowing the fire and then you're a mazik bi'adayim, that's not grama. Then you're just causing a fire. That's very intentional. So the Gemara over here says your question had no basis. The first three answers engaged the question and gave an answer. Here, was it Reb Zera? Rav Ashi says nothing doing. The question is not even a question. Doesn't even make sense. Can't compare Hilchos Shabbos, which is Maseches machshavas, to Grama b'nizaken. It's apples and oranges. That brings us to yet another Mishnah, Baruch Hashem, a third of the way down on Samech Amud Aleph. Let's continue. Asholech habe'era. Let's say you send out a fire. The achla eitzim, it consumes trees, o avanim, or stones. Can't really consume stones, but it can scorch them. And that's something that we see when there are fires by stones. O afar. In all of these cases, the halacha is chayiv. If you were sholeach that fire, right, you lit the fire knowing full well that it was going to burn that down, you're chayiv. Shenemar ki seitzei shumatza kotzim nechal gadish o akama o asadeh. Let's translate the pasuk. When a fire goes out, umatza kotzim, it finds thorns, v'nechal gadish, and it consumes a pile, o hakama, or something very tall, o hasadeh, or the field. In all of those cases, you have to pay. The mavir sabe'er, the guy who lit the fire, is obligated to pay. Omar Rava, I don't understand. Lamali dekasa rachmana kotzim gadish kama v'sadeh. Why does the pasuk speak about 4 different examples of materials that are consumed? Just say anything you consume. So the Gemara has a lengthy tzrichusa. It's about 12 lines or so, and we'll stop about halfway through the wide lines. With the tzriche, it's pretty long. It is pretty easy, thank God. And here's how it goes. Tzriche, we actually need the pasuk to speak about all of those cases. The ikas of Rachmana Kotzim, if the Torah had only written about the case of Kotzim, about the thorns, Havamina Kotzim Udechayev Rachmana. No, only in the case of the thorns and the bristly type of stuff are you chayiv. Mishum d'shchiach eish gabayu shchiach de pasha, because it's very common to have those where people light fires, and it's commonplace for people to light fires in those places. So win-win. Aval gadish, but when a person stacks up grains in a field, the lo shchiach eish gabayu, that's not a normal place for there to be fire. The lo shchiach de pasha, nor is it common for people to light fires in their yards. I might have thought that the gadish would have been excluded. That's why the pasuk had to go out of its way to speak about the gadish. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known. Last of the short lines, because of Rachmana gadish, had it been that we spoke about only gadish in the pasuk, havamina gadish chayiv Rachmana. Only the case of something that's piled up in a yard are we going to have a chiyuv. Mishum to have sid merubahu, because that's considered a significant loss. If you concentrate all of your grains into a pile and you're a farmer, that's a day's work. That's money. That's cash. So that's a big loss. However, about kotzim, thorny bushes and thorny wood have said muat emalo. Maybe the pasuk was only dealing with cases of muat, of hefsid meruba, excuse me, and not cases of hefsid muad. So therefore, the Torah needed to include the case of kotzim, thorns, to make sure that we knew that we weren't only discussing hefsid meruba, we were even discussing hefsid muad. And then the Gemara says, kama lamali, why do I have to speak about something that's tall? Says the Gemara, ma kama begalui, just like a kama is something that is revealed. Afkol begalui, this includes any item that is revealed. Interesting, why didn't we say that about a gadish? Okay, I don't know, but that's what the Gemara says, that a kama was extra to make sure we knew that even the hidden that all non-hidden things are going to be chayiv. Says the Gemara, that's a little.
Only see like the outside part of it, like the rest of it is actually hidden.
You're saying a kama is what's a kama?
Kama is when it's like it's standing there, like it's still
A tree.
like wheat or like grain, grain.
You're just saying it's regular. Does Rashi say this? No. We'll see in a minute. We're actually going to define that a kama is actually including things like trees. So let's continue and we'll have a little bit more clarity. But I totally hear your response there. Well, the Rabbi Yehuda, in regards to the case of things that are not galui, he holds that you're held accountable for things that are hidden. So then kama lamali, because then clearly kama can't mean everything that's revealed and seemingly to exclude things that are hidden. That's not true according to Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, no, it's l'rabos. The word kama teaches me the rabos kol ba'ale koma, to include anything that is a baal koma. Take a look at Rashi. Kol ba'ale koma, we're 12 lines or so from the bottom of the Rashis. Af ba'ale chaim ve'ilanos, to include even animals and trees. That's what kama comes to include. So we have kotim, so that we know that it's even by hefsid mu'ah. We have the second category was what? What did the pasuk say? We have the gadish, to make sure we knew that a gadish, which is uncommon, that's chayiv. And we have the case of kama, either to teach us that all things that are revealed are going to be chayiv, or to teach us that all ba'alei koma are going to be chayiv. I Rabbanon, 4 lines into the wide lines of the rabbos, kol ba'alei koma min alahu. According to the Rabbanon who argue against Rabbi Yehuda, so then how do they know about animals? How do they know about trees? Nafgalahu, from the extra word mi o hakama. From the extra word of o, they learn that means that there's even going to be responsibility if that thing is for ba'alei koma, for things that stand up. I Rabbi Yehuda o mi ba'alei lechalik. He says the word o teaches us lechalik. This is an important line. We wouldn't want to make a mistake in the pasuk and assume that the only time you're chayiv is if you burn all of the items in our pasuk. Kotzim, gadish, kama. We wouldn't want to make such an assertion. That would be a perfect storm. You would never be chayiv for lighting a fire if you don't burn all of those things. So that can't be. The word o teaches us that we're mechalek in the pasuk, and if it's not the operator of this and that, but rather this or this or this or that, and therefore you can be chayiv on any one of them. Great point. If you have the word o that teaches us lechalek, where did the rabbis learn this from? Says the Gemara, nafkalahu mi o hasadeh. There's another word o. Okay, well, if there's another word o, then Rabbi Yehuda, what do you do with that other word o? He says it's actually not relevant. The Gemara says 3/4 of the way down, 15 lines from the bottom, give or take. I did the kasav rachmana o hakama, because the Torah wrote o by the word hakama. Kasav, it also writes the word o by hasadeh, but really the word o is not meant for drasha. This is interesting. This is like I did the tani x over here, tani y over there. But we're talking about the Torah. Do we ever see this? It sounds very uncommon to me that we use this svara. That usually when Mishnayos were written with symmetry, it was specifically for the sake of memorization. It made it easier to learn. And this we see all the time in Shas. No, just because I did the Tana over here X, Tana Y over there. But here, in this Masechta? No, we saw that drasha. That drasha, it was the same exact argument of whether or not it was said it over there too. It's just a very interesting piece of Gemara. I don't know.
It's right. It's normally memory.
Yeah, correct. But it's also only according to one Tana. It's only according to Rabbi Yehuda. Okay. Anyways, Lamaisa Sada Lamali. Let's continue. Why does the pasuk say Sada? The Gemara says, La asuye lichacha niro v'sichsacha avanav, that if there was a singeing of the plow, and if there was a burning of stones, that those should be included in damages as well. Okay, so says the Gemara, why don't we be a little bit more lean on the real estate in the Chumash and just write v'lichto rachmana sada v'lo boy hanach. Just write sada, and you don't need anything else. So says the Gemara, tzricha, we need the word sada. Because of rachmana sada, if I only would have had the word sada, havamina masha b'sada in midi achrina lo. Only that which is in the field is going to be held account, is going to be chayiv. for the fire that you lit, but midi acharina lo, but for something else that would not be true, kamash malan, that we don't make such a distinction. That's why we had everything else listed to say that it's not just sadeh. Sadeh may not be inclusive enough. It may not include kama, may not include gadish. What if you don't have a gadish in your field? So we wouldn't have known all of the cases without this. Therefore, we had to say all the cases in our pasuk. And now let's turn our attention to some divrei agadata. We're about 12 lines from the bottom. Amar Reb Shimon bar Nachmani, Amar Reb Yonasan. Ein puranos ba'la'olam el bizman sheharishayim ba'olam. The only time we have bad things happening in the world is when there are bad people in the world. And when those bad things start to happen, they start with the righteous. It starts with them, meaning they're the first people to feel the puranus. We'll discuss why this is true in a couple of lines with a very important hashkafa, a shocking a little bit of a hashkafa aspect, which we'll see soon. And how do we know that this is true? From the pasuk that we just spent time analyzing halachically. Shenemar ki seitze eish umatza kotzim. Emasai eish yotza. When does fire come out? Bisman shekotzim mitzuyin la. When we have thorns. So the Gemara's mashal is that thorns are rishayim. Only time we have kiseitze eish, that is when we have thorns, which are rishayim, and that's how we know that when there are rishayim, bad things happen. But the fact that the punishments always start with the tzaddikim is because the pasuk says shene'emar b'ne'echal gadish. And the gadish was already consumed, past tense. The ochal gadish lo ne'emar, and it will eat. Ela v'ne'echal gadish, she'ne'echal gadish kfar, and the gadish, that which collects all of the grain, is the Talmud Chacham. What a fascinating mashal. Is that the one who collects all the grain, l'chora, the comparison is ein kamach ein Torah-ish, even if not exactly that, but the same idea. The one who has collected all the grain is equivalent to the Talmud Chacham, and that was already ne'echal, was already consumed. We therefore see that the good guy in the pasuk, which is the gadish, gets hurt first, and the Rishayim get hurt later. Tani Rav Yosef, what does the pasuk mean when it says "V'atem lo seitu ish mi pesach beso ad boker"? This pasuk is a pasuk from Sefer Shemos, which was talking about the story of when Hashem was pasach al batei avosenu b'Mitzrayim. They were told not to go out in the morning. Why couldn't until the morning? Why couldn't the Yidden go out of their homes? What if they needed to make a jewel run at 3 a.m.? I'm sure we've all done that a couple times. What? This guy's great. You're earning your keep here. Says the Gemara, the reason why the Jews couldn't go out was Kevan Shenitan Rishus Lamashches. Once the Mashches, the destroyer, namely, once the Malach HaMaves has Rishus to be Mashches, Eino Mavchen Bein Tzadikim LeRishayim. It's terrifying. It's a scary idea. And just thinking back to what Klal Yisrael is going through now in Eretz Yisrael. A lot of righteous people were killed. Innocent children. But that not only does that happen, that we have to be careful, and that's why the pasuk says we can't leave our homes on the night when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was poseach al batei avosenu b'Mitzrayim. But the good people, the tzaddikim, were hurt first. And Emar, vichrati mimcha, who comes first in the pasuk? Tzaddik v'rasha. So we see from the kadimus in the pasuk that the tzaddik gets hurt first. Bachi Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef cried. Says the Gemara, Kule hai nami la Kule hai nami la'ein domin. There's nothing that these people are worthy to be compared to. Why the tzaddikim? Why are they getting hurt here? Why is that happening? He was crying about it. Amar le Abaye. Who was Abaye to Yosef? He was a Talmud. So the Talmud responds to the Rebbe. Amar le tivusahu legabayhu. This is good for the tzaddikim. Tichsiv, because the pasuk says ki mipnei hara'a ne'esaf hatzadik. Because of the bad, Hashem gathers in the tzaddik. Rashi explains what this means. The last Rashi on the page, Dibur hamaschel tivusahu shelo yiru beraha asida lavo tichsiv v'chule, so that they should not see what's going to be happening down the road. The pain.
With Avraham Avinu.
The what?
For
The Kivshan?
No, with Esau.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. So therefore, I didn't know what you were referring to there. That makes more sense. So that's what the Gemara means, is that when there is a tzaddik, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't want the tzaddik to experience the bad things that were coming around the bend, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu took them from the world first. Interesting dynamic. It must have been after Rav Yosef had already lost his memory. Because otherwise, why was Abaye giving a response to Rav Yosef like that?
Usually he answered what he taught us.
Yeah, Amr Slan Rebbe, yeah. Shtickle kasha, I don't know if I'm right.
It's a very good question.
I don't see anyone talking about it.
Lamar.
What?
Amos Lamar.
Yeah.
Because the way he answers is not someone to help.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's just weird.
Yeah,
It's very weird. Okay. Amar Yehuda Amar Rav, turning to the top of Samach Amid Beis. This is like I got it to Gemara. You can look at it and tell it's an I got it to Gemara. A person should come in, Rashi highlights, from travel when it's kitov, which is a reference to the pasuk of kitov by or, meaning you should end your travels while the sun is still up. You should start and end your travels while the sun is up. I don't know if this is Lamaisa, or what are we worried about Mazikin? Okay, the dangers, fine. Ask your local Orthodox rabbi if you're allowed to leave after Shabbos to drive to New York, all of those kinds of things, fine. The Gemara on Samach Amid Beis continues 3 lines down. Tanu Rabbanon, Dever Ba'ir, if there's some type of plague in a city, Knes Raglecha, bring your feet inside. Shenemar Ba'atem Lo Seitu Ish Mi Pesach Beso Ad Boker. The Omer, the pasuk also adds, Lech Ami Ba B'chedraich, you should go into your room, Usegor de Lasayich Ba'adech, and close the doors behind you. That's pasuk number 2. Whenever we see Ve'omers, we almost always ask why. We're going to do that in a minute, but we have our second Ve'omer. Ve'omer, and over here the pasuk says, Michutz teshakel cherev. Outside there is a sword. Umechadarim ema, and in the rooms there's fear. That's what the Gemara says. Asks the Gemara, "My ve'omer, why do we have 3 psukim to speak about this idea that when there is dever be'ir, that we need to be indoors?" Says the Gemara, because v'chite mahani mili belelia. Perhaps you would have thought that this only applied at night, aval b'yamamalo, but it doesn't apply during the day. That's why Tashma, the pasuk says, "Leichami ba b'chedrecha skor dalasecha." That second pasuk teaches us that it's not just at night; it's even during the day. V'chite mahani mili heicha deleka. Ema migavai, and you might have thought that this is only true when there's no ema inside the house. Aval hecha deika ema migavai, but perhaps if inside the house where you're hiding there's a lot of ema, there's a lot of fear, then kinafik yasi beni inchi betzav saba alma tfei, then maybe it's better to go sit among other people and not to be lonely and to have some friends with you. Tashma, that's where we have the next pasuk. Even though in the privacy of one's home there is some type of fear still, let's remember that there's still people swinging knives outside and you should stay home. I'm sure this Gemara was quoted during the pandemic about dever and stay at home. I'm sure, the hardcore pro-maskers were probably quoting this Gemara right and left. I actually didn't hear this quoted in that context, I don't believe.
They're still wearing the masks.
They're still wearing the masks, yeah. Maybe they hold that the dever is still applicable. Gemara says 12, 15 lines down, Rava be'idan rischa, when there was some type of rischa, when he felt that there was anger in the world, havesachar koi, he would go hide inside and close the windows. There might be death in our windows, and that's why you should close the windows, seal the windows. Tanarabanan Ra'av Ba'ir, if there's a famine in the city, pazer raglecha, you should spread your legs, meaning, what does that mean? Pazer raglecha, it means you should go travel. Shneimar v'hi Ra'av Ba'aretz v'yered Avram Mitzrayim ala gur sham, go find some food. What are you going to do? Stay at home and wallow in pity? You got to go find some food. That's your responsibility. You got to take care of your family. Go do it. Ve'omer, we also know another pasuk that teaches us that of pazer raglecha, that you have to move your legs. Imamarnu navo ha'ir v'harav be'ir umasnu sham. You want us to die over there from the famine? Get up, go find food, go figure it out. My ve'omer, why do we have the second pasuk? Because the Gemara says a third of the way down. When is it that we say that this is true? It's only when there's no safek nefashos. Aval heichadika safek nefashos lo. I might have thought that if there was a safek nefashos of leaving, meaning if getting food requires me to traverse a safek nefashos, I might have thought you're better off staying put and not chasing food. Tashma l'chuvanaf lamachne aram im yichyunu nichyeh. If we live, we live. If we don't, we don't. And therefore, we see that you're supposed to push through the safek pikuach nefashos in order to get food. Hard cheshbonos. But that's what the Gemara says. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught us almost halfway down. Dever be'ir, we saw this idea already. If there is dever, if there is some type of plague in the city, al yahalech adam be'emtza haderech, a person should not walk in the middle of the road. Because the malach hamaves is the one who walks in the middle of the road. He's the one who walks in the middle of the road because he has rishus. Kevan the hiva le rishusa, because he has permission to kill. So therefore, he's the king. He's walking out in the street in public, and therefore maskele hedja, he can just walk openly. But if it's a shalom b'ir scenario, if it's a peaceful time, if it's not a war time, so then al yahalech b'tzidei drachim, then you forget about avoiding the middle of the road. That's where you should be walking. It doesn't mean middle of the road, middle of the regular thoroughfare, not where there's traffic, obviously. But when it's shalom, you shouldn't walk b'tzidei drachim. You shouldn't walk in the alleyways to kevin deles lerishusa, because since the malach hamavis doesn't have rishus to kill, mechabe chavuye umaske, it hides in those places and chases after you, and that's what you want to avoid. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis have taught us on the first of the middle width lines. Dever ba'ir, if there is a famine in the city, al yikonis adam yachid lebeis hakneses, you should not be the only person in the shul. Shemalach hamaves mafkid sham kelav. That's where he leaves all of his murderous utensils. That's only true in a place where children don't learn Torah, and velo matzu be'asara, in a shul where there aren't 10 Jews. So that doesn't apply to our shul. So we're allowed to be in our shuls alone. There's no concern about the malach hamaves, because we have a shul where there are plenty of children who learn. Like this young, he's not even a child anymore. But it means, I think, it probably means more like father-son learning type of, that's Dardiki, is like classroom children. Maybe it really means like kids sitting in the Beis HaMedrash like they would all day, like Zilberman's, they'd sit there, Zilbersteins, where they would sit, Zilberman? Yeah, where they would sit and memorize psukim and mishnayos.
It almost sounds like it's in real time, like you shouldn't be alone in a basic Maseches, no?
I thought like that the first time I read it, I did. But I don't think that's what it means. I think, and it also wasn't the way that Rabbi Resnick framed it. He said, if it isn't a place where children learn, I don't think it was.
If they're learning, you're on the wall. So
It has to be the other way. It
The
has to be.
kid is there with you, even if you're learning alone.
What?
Yeah, but but in a shul that doesn't have Dardiki, and if a shul that doesn't have Matzle Be'asara, you're not allowed to be there even with the Shechina. That's not allowed. Okay.
What
has
kind of basic Knesset doesn't have, I don't understand the definition of basic
Yeah,
Knesset.
one that's not-
So it means, for example, a shul,
Like-
we would call them like a
someone
dying
thinks
shul.
it's like
Yeah,
that.
no, like it's a real shul, but for example, it's not in use anymore.
Ah.
So let's say it just isn't the case, but when Young Israel of West Rogers Park closed, they sold it. But had it been that was sitting dormant, you should not go there by yourself. That's what it means. No children learning there, and just giving that as an example.
Not a place like that, that's small. I've been a child there for 4 years.
Is it either or?
Fix it in
It says vilo. It's not o. I don't know if that's you can be medag like that. I don't think that's an appropriate do, but it's probably either or. But I'm not really sure what issue we're trying to solve by saying either or. So I don't know. I have to do more research here. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan klavim bochim. If you hear dogs crying, malach hamav balair. It's not a good sign. Klavim misachakim, if dogs are playing, Eliyahu Navi balair, which is a very interesting indicator, because we typically assume that dogs are mechutzafin and all the other fun things we say about dogs. But nevertheless, it's a remez that Eliyahu Navi is coming. That's only true if dogs aren't joyous for the opportunities to mate, because then their misachakin is a different lens and not about Eliyahu Navi. Yasiv Ravami v'Ravasi Kamei de Rav Yitzchak Nafcha. They were sitting in front of Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. One of the Talmidim, we have Ravami and Ravasi. Mar Amar Le said to his Rabbi, said to Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, Lema Mar Shmaitzel. Let's talk in halachic learning. Umar Amar Le Lema Mar Agadata. No, I want to learn Agadata. I want to learn Dvar Mamosh Chenas Halev. I want to learn these kinds of Gemars like the ones we're learning now. So Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha was Pasach Lememar Agadata. He was opening his mouth to teach an Agadata. Why didn't he listen to the first person? I don't know. He listened to the Agadata person. Below Shavik Mar, the Talmud who wanted to learn halacha stopped him. Said, Rebbe, no. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, we have to learn halacha. He's like, okay, fine. Pasach lemeimar shmaitza. So he started talking and learning, and the other guy stopped him. V'lo shavik mar. Amar lehem. The Rebbe Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha says back to Rav Ami Ravasi, Emshol lachem mashal. I want to give you a mashal to show you how difficult you're being. Lema davar domeh. What are you two similar to? La'adam sheyesh lo shtei nashim. There's a man who has two wives. Achaz yalda. One of the wives is younger, dark-haired. Achaz zakena. When the other wife, is an older woman with white hair. Yalda melaketes lo levanos. His wife, who's very young, plucks out all the white hairs. She wants her husband to look young. Zakena, but the older woman wants her husband to look old like she is. So she's melaketes lo shchoros. She plucks out all of this man's black hairs. And what's he left with? Absolutely nothing. Says the Gemara, Nimsa kerech mikan mikan. What? What? Yeah, according to some, our show has a lot of bald people who are young, I just wish everyone was here right now, I do. It'd be nice. So that's what the Gemara says. And this is basically Musar, is that you guys are not letting me teach any Torah. You're being so difficult. Let me just talk and learning. Stop it. Amar Lahen, and then he finally decides to do the following. I'll give you a vort that can be understood in both halachic ways and agadic ways, and no problem at all. What is that? That, of course, is our pasuk from our Mishnah. Ki seise eish umatza kotzim, teitze me'atzma. That's when the fire goes out on its own. Shalem mishalem hamavir sabeira. What does this mean? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, alai l'shalem sabeira shehiv arti. It's a fascinating Gemara. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I hold some responsibility for the fires. Ani hitzati esh b'tzion. I, Hashem says, and the one who started the fire in Tzion. Shenemar v'yatzas esh b'tzion batocha yisodoseha. That fire came out from Tzion, and it consumed its foundations. V'ani asi livnosa be'esh shene'amar v'ani ehyeh la chomas esh saviv u'lechvod ehyeh besocha. So fine, so we see that in the future there will be fire as well. And the Gemara then says, Shmaitza, what about the halachic pieces? Pasach hakasav b'nizkei mamon. Interestingly, the pasuk starts out with nizkei mamon, of my animals causing damage, and b'sim b'nizkei gufo, and finishes, the pasuk concludes with me, the balabas, doing damage. So says the Gemara, why did that happen? Says the Gemara, lomar lach eisha mishum chitzav, to teach us a side din, the fact that we had the pasuk speaking in two frames. One is a frame of nizkei mamona, where my animal causes damage, and the other is the frame of nizkei gufa, where I, as a human, cause damage. That teaches us eisha mishum chitzav, that if I let my animal go, I'm held accountable, and if I cause the damage, I'm held accountable. Eisha mishum chitzav. A long pasuk over here. The pasuk says, "Vayisaved David." David had a desire. Vayomer mi ashkeni mayim mibor beis lechem asher b'shar. Who can give me water from the water pit in Beis Lechem that's at the gate, at the open of the city? Oh, so then three servants responded. There were three people who ran through Machane Plishtim, and they collected the water. So the Gemara assumes that this is not literal. The Gemara assumes that he was asking a shaila. That's what the Gemara says. My kami boile. What was the question that David wanted to know about? So where do we see in the pasuk that he had a question? Well, since the whole pasuk is a mashal, just look back at the pasuk. Vayishal David vayomer mi ashkeni mayim mi bor beis lechem asher b'shar. Who's going to give me water? What's water? A mayim elatorah. So he had a shaila, he had a kasha that he wanted to ask. Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman, tamun be'esh kami boile. The question that he was asking was about tamun be'esh. If something is hidden, what would be the din by fire? Iki Rabbi Yehuda, do we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda that you are going to be held accountable because tamun be'esh is chayiv, or do we hold like the Rabbanan that you're pater on tamun? So that was really his question. Upashtulei ma'ide pashtulei. Whatever the answer that they got from traveling through the Plishtim to go ask a shaila, they got. Doesn't matter. The Gemara doesn't even discuss it. Rav Huna Amar, Gedishim de Seorim de Yisrael. So all of that was approach number one of the pasuk, which is the approach of Tamun Be'esh. And we'll come back to all three of these answers, but that was answer number one. Here's answer number two. Rav Huna Amar, Gedishim de Seorim de Yisrael Havu. Let's assume for the moment, says the Gemara, that Gedishim, this was the shaila that David was asking. There are piles of Seorim, of barley that belong to Yidden. The Havu Mitamre Plishtim Behu. And there were people hiding in them. There were Plishtim hiding in the Gadish of Seorim of Yisrael, of a Jew. become a baile. And the question that David was asking was, Mahu lahatzil atzmo b'mamon chavero. Am I allowed to burn down your pile of grain that has a plishti in it in order to prevent me from getting hurt? Says the Gemara, Shalchu le, the rabbis in the Bezdin responded, really in general, asur lahatzil atzmo b'mamon chavero. In general, it's forbidden to be matzil yourself by burning down your friend's property. Abal ata melech ata. You, David, are a king. Umelech poretz lasos lo haderech ve'ein mochen biyado. You can do whatever you want. So that was the shaila he was asking, was about whether or not I can burn down your field in order to kill a plishti who's hiding there. And answer number 3 as to what the question was of David in the pasuk, the Rabbanon, the Tema Rabba Bar Mori Amru, they said Gedishim de Seor and Israel Habu. Correct. There were piles of barley that the Jews had. Ugdishim de Adashim, there were piles of lentils de Plishtim. So what was the kasha of David in the pasuk? 6 lines or so from the bottom. The question that was being asked was like this: Mahu litol Gedishim shal Seor and Israel. What about the following? Are we allowed to take seorin, barley that belongs to a yid, litain lifnei behemto, in order for me to feed my animals, almanas l'shalem gedishin shel adashim deplishtim, and I'll pay them back with the booty, with that which I take from the goyim. They have adashim in their field. So Shalchule, the Bezdin wrote back to David, and they said, Chavol yashiv rasha gzeila yishalim, that it's considered that you're still a rasha, even if you're gzeira yishalim, even if you're giving back what you stole, you're still not a good guy. Afal pisha gzeila mishalim, even though you're paying back, and that's actually a mitzvah d'oraisa. It's the classic example of a lav hanitak le'aseh, of an isser d'oraisa that's connected directly to a mitzvah saseh. It's an isser d'oraisa to be gozel, but if you are gozel, then we have a din of heishivas hagzela asher gozel. So that's what the Gemara says, that afal pisha gzela mishalim rashahu. However, aval ata melech ata, you're allowed to do this deal where you're allowed to give your animals from the seorim of the yidden and agree to pay back the yidden with the adashim of the goyim. So the Gemara says, you're the king. Umelech poretz lasos lo derech. You're allowed to do whatever you need. Ve'ein mochen biyado. So the Gemara now poses 4 questions. We're actually going to be stopping at the next Mishnah, which is about a quarter of the way down. That's all good, Michael. It's all good. We'll get there. That's a lot of Torah. So it's a big Masechta. So the Gemara says as follows. Let's ask a few questions. I understand the answer of Ichlufe, the third shaila, which is the shaila of the Rabbanon, of am I allowed to take someone's gedishim and replace them with the lentils of a goy? Hainu dichsiv chadkra. That's because we have one pasuk that says Vatihisham chelkas asadeh melea adashim. One pasuk there talks about lentils. Uchsiv chadkra, and another pasuk says Vatih chelkas asadeh melea seorim. I could understand if that was your kasha. The psukim there make perfect sense. 3 lines from the bottom. That what we're discussing is burning the person's field, which was one of the 3 answers that we saw. So there the Gemara says, Ma'i boy lehu lahani trei kroi. Then if that's what the pasuk is talking about, then why do we have one pasuk talking about adashim and one pasuk talking about seorim? So Amar Lach, we could have argued dahavu nami gedishin da adashim di Israel dahavu mitmare behu plishtim, that the plishtim were hiding in both places. They were hiding in the adashim of Jews as well as in the other material, which was the adashim and the seorim. Thank you. So therefore, not a problem. And then question number 2 of the Gemara is Bishlam alamanda amar lamakli. I understand that in the second answer that we had said, in the name of Rav Huna, that the shaila was about burning the field. Hainu d'chsiv, the pasuk says, "Vayisyatse b'soch hachelka vayatzila." That makes sense. That pasuk speaking about a field being burning. Ela lamanda amar leichlufe. But according to the third answer, my vayatzila. What's the vayatzila? All we're talking about is 2 people swapping materials. So it shouldn't have been that way. So says the Gemara, no, delo shavak luhu la'achlufe, that we're talking about a case where there was nothing to pay back. I only had the case of me burning the lentils. I didn't have the opportunity to give back anything else. So therefore, no option. And the third question on the last line of Samech Hamid Beis, the Gemara says, Bishlamahani Tarte answers 2 and 3. I understand. Hainu d'chsiv trei kroi. Both of those answers require the psukim, one about seorim and one about the other material. No problem. That makes perfect sense about the adashim. Ella, turning to the top of Samach Aleph Amar Aleph, Amar Tamun Be'esh Kami Boile. According to the one, which is answer number 1, who says we're talking about Tamun, Mai Boile Kroi. What do these psukim help us? They don't help us at all. So Amar Lachi would respond that when it comes to Tamun, V'chada Mehanach Kami Boile. He was saying that there was a double shaila that David was asking in the pasuk. One was about something that's Tamun. Can I burn down someone's property in order to kill someone who is Tamun? And one of the other types of one of the other answers that were given kami baile, that's what he wanted to know, and therefore the psukim do make sense. And the last question is Bishlam Alaman Amar Hani Tarte. I understand answers 2 and 3 that were presented at the bottom of the page. Hainu Dichsiv Some he didn't even want to drink the water afterwards, which is a mashal to say that he didn't even want to listen to the psak. Amar, he argued, Kevan de Ika Isura Lo Nichali. Even if fundamentally there is an isser, so he said lo nichali, even though he was a melech and he was allowed, but it wasn't comfortable for him to do something only because he had executive privileges. He didn't want to flex that muscle. He only wanted to do things that were right. According to the first answer that we saw, that we were asking about something that was hidden in a field, in a gadish, michti, we have to analyze. What do you mean you're not listening? You asked a shaila, you got a psak, you should be mekil. We should be following the psak of the Rav. So then, therefore, my lo avad David l'shasosam. Why didn't he want to drink the waters? Namely, why couldn't he accept the psak? It says the Gemara, he could accept the psak, but the lo amrinhu mishmaihu. He didn't say it in their name. Amar, he had a tradition. Kach mekublani mi beis dino shel Shmuel haramati. He had a Masorah from Shmuel that called Amoser Atzmo Lamusal Divrei Torah. Anyone who tries to get themselves killed because these people ran through the Plishti camp to find out answers to these halachic shailas, and they do so al Divrei Torah. Ein omrim dvar halacha mishmo. We don't say the halacha in their name. What does the pasuk mean when it says Vayasech osa laHashem? This is a pasuk in Shmuel as well. And there, that's really the end of the pasuk, that he was Vayasech osam laHashem, that they were anointed toward Hashem. I could understand answers 2 and 3 about the Seorim and about the Adashim, no problem. Mishum de'avad l'shem shamayim. Those are being done for perfect reasons. That's why it was osam laHashem. What are you talking about Hashem? What does that even mean? We're not even talking about that. Says the Gemara, what he meant in the name by saying Vayasech osam laHashem was that he did so mishma de Gemara, quoting it from the Gemara, although not in a specific person's name. We'll stop right here at the Mishnah. That's a quarter of the way down on Samach Aleph Amar Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful day.